Don't worry, y'all. I'm back. I took some time to study for some work licenses, but we have a lot to talk about, especially before we get to the end of July, because there's a lot of paddles dropping, and I want to make sure that you guys are all well informed before they do. I want to briefly cover the 11SIX24 Hurache-X Kevlar paddle drop, and why I felt like it kind of went under the radar, especially in comparison to the original drops. So let's talk about it. First, a little bit of context. The flagship model of 11SIX24 Pickleball, the company with, quote, the most forgettable name and the least forgettable paddles, was the Hurache-X Control Plus 16mm paddle. You can get 10% off any of the paddles mentioned in this video using my code RAFA at checkout, and I'll link that down in the description. 11SIX24 Hurache paddles come in the following models: the Hurache Control, the Hurache-X Control Plus, and the Hurache-X Control Kevlar paddles. I'll throw up the stats about the Hurache-X Control Plus 16mm paddle now. This is an elongated Gen 2 raw carbon fiber paddle, and essentially its two best characteristics are its triple layered face comprised of two carbon fiber sheets with a layer of fiberglass sandwiched in between to help it achieve great power, and a 6-inch handle length, which gave great flexibility for two-handed shots. My overall thoughts on the paddle were that it was mostly average. Achieving a 6.4 twist weight with a 6-inch handle is not easily done, so that impressed me. And the power level was not something I noticed right away, but definitely broke in over the course of a couple of weeks. And at the time that it came out was much higher than many other raw carbon fiber paddles it was being compared to, like the 6-0 Double Black Diamond. Although admittedly, every paddle gets compared to the 6-0 Double Black Diamond. I found the spin and hand speed and overall playing experience with the paddle to be fairly standard, and the only other thing it really had going for it was the price point being at $140, which is pretty competitive. It's by no means a bad paddle, and in fact, my opinion of it now is a little bit higher than it was before just because I've played with it a little bit more, but it's just not a paddle that I can see people needing to actively switch to unless you're on the market looking for a paddle right now with its unique characteristics. But 11SIX24 grabbed my attention again with the drop of the Hurache-X Control Kevlar paddles, which also came in a 14mm version. So let's talk about what I learned about those. Here's the data that I collected about the Hurache-X Control 16 and 14mm Kevlar paddles. And honestly, just by looking at them on paper, I was not expecting a significant improvement from the Hurache-X Control Plus raw carbon fiber. The overall dimensions are exactly the same among all three paddles, the swing weight's very similar, the twist weight's nearly identical, and even the balance points were very close. Furthermore, in the power, pop, and spin categories, the Kevlar paddles actually lag behind the original Control Plus raw carbon fiber. I was expecting this from the power and pop categories because they lack the fiberglass layer that gives the added power to the original paddle. However, in the spin category, we normally see Kevlar paddles being very competitive with everything else on the market, so I wasn't expecting the decrease in this attribute. And to boot, these paddles were priced $10 higher than the original Hurache-X Control Plus. Still by no means outside of competitive pricing range, but still an increase. But keeping in mind that stats don't always tell the full story, I'm going to launch into the gameplay experience of both of these Kevlar paddles, and I do think that one of them does bring something to the table that might make it a little bit more worth it than the Control Plus raw carbon fiber. I'll start off by stating that the paddle that did not give me an improved experience, in my opinion, was the Kevlar 14mm. While the 14mm was more poppy, it didn't feel like it had the increase in hand speed or maneuverability, and really didn't improve too much more on power like I would normally expect a 14mm to do in comparison to a 16mm. And while I was impressed by the stability, I did feel like the reduction in sweet spot due to the decreasing core size far outweighed the impacts of having a more stable paddle. In my mind, having a high twist weight only matters if you have a larger sweet spot to be able to hit good balls in those wider areas to back it up. This happens on the Carbon 1X or the Honolulu J2K or the Core Shapeshifter, for example. And while there's not a lot of competition in the realm of 14mm full Kevlar paddles right now, I would say that the 6-0 Ruby 14 is still the best in that category. But I will say there does exist a $30 or $40 price difference between the two. And whether or not the increased performance from the Ruby is worth that difference is something I go back and forth on, and I would highly recommend demoing one or both of these paddles before making a decision like that. Now to get to the good stuff. You can obviously tell by now that I feel like the Kevlar 16mm Hurache-X Control paddle does bring some sort of improvement in comparison to the Control Plus raw carbon fiber. And in my opinion, that improvement is in the ball feel. In terms of maneuverability, the Hurache-X Control Kevlar 16 felt very similar to the Control Plus raw carbon fiber 16. The plow through the ball felt exactly the same due to the similar balance points, although the power was definitely lacking in comparison to the original Control Plus raw carbon fiber. I will also say that the spin did become a factor at some point using the Kevlar paddle. On paper, the difference between this and the raw carbon fiber Control Plus 16 is only about 100 RPMs, but the more and more you play with both paddles, I did feel like the grit was starting to wear a little bit faster on the Kevlar in comparison to the original, so that's something to think about if spin is a really big part of your game. But the one thing I feel like this paddle improves upon, and I feel like most paddles in general gain by adding Kevlar, is the muted ball feel. What I mean by that is that this paddle mitigates that sort of shocking feeling you get on an off-center mishit with an average paddle, much like the raw carbon fiber Control Plus 16, and it makes for a more comfortable, controlled experience. Where I feel like Kevlar paddles like the Hurache-X Control Kevlar 16 lack in power in comparison to their raw carbon fiber counterparts, I feel like they more than make up for in that premium ball feel that I've really come to enjoy in my playing experience. And so to put it simply, in the end, whether or not you go between the Control Plus raw carbon fiber or spend the $10 extra to get the Kevlar 16 comes down to whether or not you can afford to lose that little bit of power and a little bit on the spin in order to increase your ball control and have that more premium ball feel experience. My experience with both of these paddles was good and solid, but I still find myself on the journey to find a Kevlar paddle that can dethrone the Honolulu J2K right now. The main thing to note that the Hurache-X Control has going for it in comparison to the J2K is that it not only has more handle length, but it even has a thinner neck taper, so that even if you get a Hurache-X that might not measure up to exactly 6 inches, that thinner neck taper will allow you to overwrap and is much more comfortable for two hands than the J2K. I'll list some paddles that are a little bit more popular that I think play similar to the 3 paddles I mentioned in this video, and I hope this review helps you make your decision in some way. In my opinion right now, if you're looking to buy 11SIX24 and you're wondering what's going to be the most worth it, I might hold off until the Monarch wide bodies get released very soon because they're speculated to be some of the better wide bodies out there. And in general, wide body paddles I've been finding to be really solid and stable and are kind of having their moment in the pickleball paddle world right now. If you made it here to the end, thank you so much for watching and for your support. Remember to like and subscribe and comment down below what paddles you want to see reviewed next. And I hope to catch you all in the next video. Peace.